So I'm looking at these patch notes right now. The first big set of changes that we're supposed to get for 3.19 that is supposed to be working towards giving us something back. And unfortunately, it just kind of feels like all of my fears were correct. So I talked about anchoring in the last video. I talked about how it's something that GGG was doing. It's a negotiation tactic that people tend to use in like negotiating salaries and things like that is where it's typically ending up, or payment for something. So to give you a quick idea of what anchoring is before I get into the patch notes and before we talk about this, the way that it works is that a real life example would be if you are interviewing for a job and you go to the interview, you go through everything, and you get to the point where you're talking about salary. Typically, the person who ends up being the one that sets the price of the salary first, who anchors the price of the salary first, comes out ahead. If your job is typically worth $100,000, that's the market going average for your job. If you go into the interview and say, hey, I'm looking at $110,000 for my salary, well, the person who's interviewing you is going to be like, oh, so their services are worth $110,000. That's what they value themselves at. Let's see if I can get them down a little bit. So the price comes down a little bit and you get the $100,000. That's what they negotiate to. So they feel like they've gotten a good deal because they were able to pull back a little bit, and you know that you have also gotten a good deal because you're going at market rate. However, it is much, much harder to argue up because it leaves one side feeling very poor, typically the side with more power. So if you go into the same interview and they say, oh, well, the salary is going to start at 85,000, and you say, oh, well, I kind of wanted 110,000. There's a huge difference now. It's not just like a small drop of $10,000. You've got to work with a $25,000 difference here, which is a much, much harder case to argue. Thus, the business wins. So what GGG has done at this point, and what I feel that has happened, is that they have massively reduced power, and now they're giving us back just a little itty bitty tiny bit of it, and hoping that we'll be okay with that. So let's jump into the notes. So we've got 3.19.0D. These are the patch notes that they said that they were going to put out. They said that there were so many changes that they would have to wait. They wouldn't be able to put them all in here. And reading through here, there's nothing impressive. It's basically exactly what they said that they were going to do, exactly what they said they were going to do from the original post, and almost nothing more. So let's begin. This patch includes improvements to item drops, including those from map bosses and rare monsters with 2 to 4 arch nemesis modifiers, reductions to the life of harvest monsters, and a few bug fixes and improvements. Item drop changes. We're starting off with the worst one here. This is the one that is almost insulting at this point. Map bosses now drop fewer items, but of substantially better rarity, resulting in more unique items being found from map bosses. This is the same change that they made to the bosses in Axe, where now they drop better items. I don't know about you guys, I haven't noticed much of a difference. I'll maybe see a unique every once in a while from a boss, but it's not all the time. Katava sometimes drops something cool, but it's never something amazing. The issue with this change is that this works for SSF. This is a buff for SSF, an actual somewhat meaningful one. But 95% of the people who play this game are in softcore trade. This does not do anything for them. This is absolutely useless. So was the previous change where they like raised it by like 25% chance to drop better bases. Completely worthless change that does absolutely nothing. Problem here is that you increase rarity, but rare items that drop on the ground can never be better than items that are crafted. It does not happen. It is not possible in Path of Exile for crafted items to be worse than items that can drop on the ground. It is just inherently a flawed way of thinking about drops in this game. Typically, if you want a higher powered character, you need to be using these items that are crafted and created through the different currencies and through the different methods that are available in the game. Unless you make a way to combine these items like recombinators, or make it so that literally like elevated tailwind boots can drop on the ground, there will never be a time where loot from the ground matters. You will never be equipping these items over stuff that you could have, that you could craft, ever. The other problem here is that there are hundreds of completely worthless uniques in this game, and making it so that more of them drop is not going to do anybody but solo self-found players a favor. The problem here is that the extremely ultra rare tier uniques will get a slight reduction in price, and everything else is just going to be one chaos. The vast majority of uniques are worthless. You can't actually make money through these. Sure, it's probably going to make a couple uniques that were like 5 or 10 chaos before, now they're going to be like 2 or 3 chaos, But how good are you going to feel about finding a 2 or 3 chaos unique now instead of a 5 to 10 chaos unique? A lot of people towards the end of the league won't even stop to sell something that's worth 5 to 10 chaos because it's such a pittance, it's such a worthless amount of currency to them. So this change, honestly, does absolutely nothing, and I hate that they keep pushing it this way, and I hate that they keep trying to say that it's some massive, overwhelmingly like good change. Like in the last post, they said this is a significant buff. It's not. It's a completely meaningless and worthless change. Now, let's talk about the even more worthless and useless changes that they're making here. Globally increase the base drop rate of unique items by 33% and currency items by 25%. This, at first glance, looks like it's good. I'm sure a lot of you are seeing this and thinking, how could you think that 33% or 25% base drop rate of these items is a bad thing? How is this a bad buff? Like, what's going on? I'm going to take some numbers from someone who is way better at this game than me. This is Snaps. This is the mastermind, the big brain guy from the team that Impy is a part of. This is the guy that does all of the stuff that makes their group possible, okay? This is a guy who has been magic finding and been playing this game at a absolute peak item drop level for like 10 years now, okay? He has said that on average, players have lost 90% of items that they drop. 90% of the like gains that we were getting previously in 3.18 are gone. And the way that you get to 90% is that at the very super high-end juiced versions of running maps where you're spending multiple hundreds of chaos, the difference in percentage of like just raw items that are worth anything that they're getting is close to 99% reduction. For an average player or just someone who is running around and doing maps that does some basic juicing in their maps, they're getting around an 80% reduction in items. So this is where we come to this average of 90. So if we are at 100%, if last league in 3.18 we were at 100, that's how many items, that was like the power of items that we could drop at any one point. We're going from 100. They nerf us by 90%. That brings us to 10. Okay? If you take 10 and you increase 10 by 25%, where does that leave you? The problem here is that a lot of people don't understand how item drops actually work in this game. So the way that it works is that each base monster has a certain amount of like chance to drop things, right? Has a certain percentage chance to drop something. Previously, League mechanics added things that were into the map had a massive bonus to the items that were dropping, sometimes up to 11,000% increased of just like items and how good the items were. 11,000 in some of the best case scenarios. We don't know the numbers specifically, but that's the numbers that people have been saying. Up to 11,000%. They completely removed that 11,000%. You know that massive, like, historic bonus that I was talking about in the last video? They removed an 11,000% modifier, probably on an average of like 5 to 6,000 most of the time, and replaced it by a 200 to 300% modifier. It's an absolutely unbelievably huge nerf to the amount of loot that we're getting. And now we're taking that tiny little itty bitty number that we have and increasing it by 25 or 33%. That's how much that we've got. So what does this mean? This means that it's going to push people into things where we're not actually killing monsters anymore. It's going to push people towards mechanics that previously were very, very unliked mechanics. These are mechanics that were just really genuinely disliked by the community. Things like heist, things like opening chests or interacting with expedition, things where you have to do stuff outside of just killing random monsters to be able to get loot. These are the things that people are going to be pushed towards to be able to find items and to get items in the game. So if that sounds fun to you, then I'm happy for you, genuinely. But I know that for me, I'm okay with heist, but in general, when I'm playing this game, I prefer to be killing enemies to get my loot. I prefer to just be able to do some random maps and things like that. I don't want to feel forced to do these other things. Arch Nemesis changes. Increase the item rarity for monsters with 2 Arch Nemesis modifiers and substantially increase the item rarity for monsters with 3 and 4 Arch Nemesis modifiers. With the item drop conversion system, this results in a lot more powerful drops when hitting certain combinations of modifiers. It also results in a lot more unique items for monsters with 3 or 4 modifiers. How much? How much? There's no numbers here. How much have you increased the rarity? Because honestly, unless this is like an absurd amount, it's just completely irrelevant. The base drops from monsters have been so absurdly destroyed that this doesn't matter. People don't care about rare items. They don't. They will never be better than crafted items. Ever. It's not possible currently in Path of Exile. I don't care if we're going to get 5 to 10 more uniques per map. They're all going to be trash uniques and none of them are going to be worth anything. And even if we got more of the rare uniques, you know what ends up happening if you just drop a whole bunch of extra rare uniques? The price goes down. And a lot of the time, uniques aren't even really like the build defining thing, and a lot of the build defining uniques can't even drop from arch nemesis mobs. So it's just so infuriating that it's being pushed in this direction, because it doesn't actually do anything. It is a complete distraction at this point from the actual real problem. The quantity of items has been nerfed substantially, and we're not going to get any actual better items that drop. Talking about the harvest changes. Reduce the life of a bunch of monsters. That's cool. Reduce the life of all other harvest monsters, bringing the harvest monster life more in line with monsters found in other League content. That's cool. These changes do not affect the Spectred version of these monsters. No one is playing Spectres at this point. Minions have been absolutely destroyed. If you haven't seen the videos of Gazi, go watch the videos of Gazi. Go watch the clips of Gazi where his Animate Guardian is being killed by like white map beyond mobs. Minions are destroyed. You have absolutely neutered Spectres to the point where they are completely irrelevant. This line doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter because no one is using these Spectres anyways. They die instantly. And then that's it for the most part. Then we've got some bug fixes. There's nothing really super big in here. They fixed a bug where Valkyries was a good item for a couple of days. They made it so that strong boxes, which was also not an actual issue, just because one streamer randomly, you know, had like a strong box that didn't drop something, they need to make this big giant change to strong boxes, make sure they don't drop any items. Cool, I guess. I don't even know what this means. I guess there was a mission that was way too hard, and there was apparently a client crash for a pet. Okay, cool, that's fine. The last part here is something, but it still doesn't fix the ultimate issue with Harvest in general. They've changed how much it costs to be able to use a lot of the harvest crafts, and they fixed an issue where there was just like the descriptions were backwards or something like that. They've also made it so that the harvest craft that fractures a random modifier in an item with at least 5 modifiers can now be used in an item with at least 4 modifiers. This is honestly the best change in the entirety of the patch notes. I know that's like crazy to think of when you see all these other changes. This is the best change that we got. This whole set of patch notes, this one right here, this is the best change that we've got out of it. This is the only thing to even be somewhat happy about. All of these changes, like reducing the cost of all of these, sure, it's nice. That's great. I'm glad that a lot of this stuff is cheaper, but you've completely neutered everything that was really useful in Harvest. I didn't even realize how bad the nerfs were until I like talked with a couple other people, because I haven't interacted with Harvest a ton because it feels like bait. Not only have they removed a lot of the very useful crafts, the crafts that we do have, the ones that are like, you know, reroll an item with life or reroll an item with attack or whatever it is, have been absolutely destroyed. No longer are there any crafts of those kinds where it says these kinds of modifiers are much more likely. Those are just gone. It is just now roll an item with one of those kinds of modifiers and the rest of the mods are random, which makes it almost completely useless, except when you're doing metacrafting, and almost no one does metacrafting. It's way too expensive for people to be able to afford metacrafting a lot of the time. It's like they're just like dodging around all of the real issues and doing all of these changes that don't actually fix anything. It's really frustrating. I want to be happy about some of the stuff that they've done, but if there aren't more substantial changes happening after this, nothing changes. It's not any better. Nothing is actually fixed. I'll be 100% honest with you at this point. It's really hard for me to want to log into Path of Exile right now. I ended stream early because I was just simply not having fun. I was playing Heist and I was making money, but I sat down and I thought to myself, and I'm like, what am I actually going to do with all of the money that I've made? What is there to actually work on and do? We have the same exact meta that we've had for 6 months. There's one new build that I'm even somewhat interested in, and at the very best, that's going to be one of the only things that I can realistically do. The Lake of Kalandra has a lot of potential, but honestly, even with some buffs to items, it just doesn't really look like it's going to be that great if overall item drops are just as terrible as they are now. In the last 6 months, we've gotten Almost no changes to the actual balance of the game. Seismic Trap got nerfed, and guess what? Seismic Trap is one of the only builds in the game that's actually killed an Uber boss in solo self-found hardcore race. It's one of the only builds that has done it. It's actually absurd to me how little balance changes we've gotten. We're not balancing around fun anymore, we're balancing the fun out of the game at this point. If they find something that's actually good, they're just getting rid of it, and they're giving us absolutely nothing else in return. I really hate to be this negative, I really hate to be like this, but this isn't the Path of Exile that I've loved over the last couple of years. This is the worst that I've felt about the game ever. And it's not just the fact that all of these changes are bad, it's that it feels like GGG is being sneaky. It feels like they care less. It feels like they're morphing into just another random faceless gaming company that I just am going to feel adversarial against at this point. I don't want that. I've enjoyed and felt okay supporting GGG this entire time because they have been so forward and been so willing to work with the community. And this patch is just an insult. Honestly, it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't do anything. So as for right now, I don't even know if I'm going to keep making content this league. I'll probably keep making these videos talking about the different changes that they do, but there's a pretty good chance that I just don't really log in anytime soon. And that's really sad for me to say, if I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I was the most excited I've ever been for this patch, and I honestly just feel like an absolute clown for hyping everybody up for it, because all of the changes that they promised us and all the stuff that they said that they were gonna do all just ended up being absolutely massive nerfs. I'm tired of nerfs. I don't want to see such massive reworks pitched as these crazy positive changes, because I just don't believe it anymore. Everything is just getting nerfed. And you nerf it so much to bring it back just a tiny bit, and people eat it up and think that it's great and everything's fixed. But at the end of the day, the game is just like 80% worse now, and I don't really know that I want to log in.